This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. And this week, woohoo, we got something extra special for you. Stand-Up Comic out of Los Angeles, California. He's a very successful corporate guy. You've seen him on TV like HBO, MTV, and Showtime. He has his own CD out called Who Needs Sanity? Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike Guido. Mike, thank you for joining us on the show.
Hey, Scott, my pleasure. Totally my pleasure.
It's
happy to be here.
It's so great to get a chance to chat with you again. I should let the audience know we haven't had a chance to work together in comedy, but I met you through Bruce Baum doing a comedy roundtable that aired earlier, so people may remember that. If you didn't hear it, go listen, because it was a whole lot of fun. But Mike is a very successful stand-up comic and has been doing this quite a while. Mike, how long have you been in the business?
Well, let's see. I started in 1984, 87 years, I believe.
Well, math being your strong suit. Now, were you always in LA, or did you get your start somewhere else?
No, actually, I started in San Francisco back then when, it was so great. San Francisco was just a hotbed of stand-up comedy and so many great people. Comics who even went on to be great stand-ups, but also actors and writers and producers and incredible. It was the perfect place to be to start stand-up, I believe. San Francisco, 1984. I like to say it was kind of like, what Greece was to the Olympics in the very beginning. San Francisco was to stand-up comedy in the 80s.
Well, that wouldn't be much of a stretch. I will tell everybody in the audience that I got started in 1980, but it was 80 to 90 specifically. But by 1984, comedy, the rock and roll wave of comedy had really started going. And as you said, the hotbed for comedy was definitely San Francisco. You had Cobb's, you had the Punchline, the famous Holy City Zoo. There were so many places you could work, and at the time, and they were working for me, so I know you got a chance to work with them, but of course, Robin Williams, Dana Carvey, Paula Poundstone, there was a number of people that got their start back in those days in San Francisco. What a great way to kick off. How did you decide to get into stand-up? How did you fall into the career?
Well, it's funny, and real quick on San Francisco, believe it or not, at one point for a year or two or three, there were 5 full-time clubs in San Francisco itself. 5 like Wednesday through Sunday clubs.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's just incredible. And then you had all the satellite one-nighters around the area. So we were just working like every night, Didn't even have to go on the road, even though we did, but there was just so much going on. But to answer your question, so I grew up in a small town in Monroe, in New York State called Monroe, New York. It's about 50 miles like northwest of Manhattan. And my dad loved comedy. And my dad would sit me down, just say, "Hey, Mike, come here, sit down, watch this." And it would be your show of shows or Jackie Gleason's show, or some stand-up comedian that he thought was really funny.
Yeah, if you grew up on Sid Caesar and Jackie Gleason, those are incredible talents.
My dad loved Norm Crosby. You remember him? The guy who malaprops, got the wrong word. My dad, his whole life, called radial tires radical tires because he got that from Norm Crosby.
Yeah, Norm was one of those guys that got comedy out of twisting words, and he was the host of the show that's famous back in the 80s.
I don't remember it, but I've seen it. I've seen episodes of it even recently, and it was a lot of stand-ups and that sort of thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, you know what it was? It was Norm Crosby's Comedy Shop.
There you go.
Yeah, see, okay, for those that you were patiently waiting, Norm Crosby's Comedy Shop. And it was great because he was showcasing talent But long before Evening at the Improv or any of the other comedy TV shows, he was actually supporting stand-up, and they would get some celebrity to co-host to get people to watch. But there was a lot of not famous people that were soon to become famous that got their first TV spot on the Comedy Shop. But your dad introducing you to stand-up through Sid Caesar and Norm Crosby, what a great way to get started. Did you remember your first time on stage?
Yeah. But the thing was, even with what my dad introduced me to, I remember watching, and I hate to say it now because he's known for something completely different and disgusting and terrible and evil, but Bill Cosby. But there's no denying that Bill Cosby was a fantastic, funny comedian. And one time my dad sat me down to watch him on TV. And I really had this thought process. I went, wow, that guy, first of all, how he's using words. I got the impression that, he was deliberately using certain words in a certain way, in a certain sequence to make people laugh. And they were really laughing. And they really loved him. And right there and then I go, in my own mind, I want to do that. But in the meantime, I was this really shy, really introverted, scared of my own shadow little boy that couldn't see it ever happening.
Well, a lot of comics are basically shy. That's one of the nuances or psychosis of stand-ups. And we all understand that Bill made some bad choices later in life, but way back in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s, some of his comedy albums are still considered some of the best stand-up comedy ever. Just incredibly funny guy. And the fact that you were able to experience that, and sounds like you started to kind of break down the essence of a joke. So when it came your turn, do you remember your first joke?
Well, you asked my first time on stage. So first of all, I had this coworker, this gal in New York, and I guess I let out my secret a little to her that I really wanted to do this someday. So she takes me to Catch a Rising Star in New York. And it was an open mic night. And I just watched one dude or gal after another just go down in flames. And I thought to myself, hey, I can do that.
Everybody's blowing up in front of you and you're going, I could do that.
Yeah, I could suck that bad. This is perfect.
Well, we should explain to the audience that the New York audience is a different beast and much harder to play to. And the Catch, which was a groundbreaking comedy club on the East Coast, was certainly one of those places that, like the clubs we mentioned out on the West Coast, was a crucible for some of those early stand-up comics.
Yeah. I met a very young but later to be very famous comedians like Chris Rock there back in that day. But so I finally got the nerve, and I think I mentioned this on the roundtable portion of the podcast where I took Frank Kidder's kind of how to be a stand-up comedian class, because I figured that would be a good way to just test the water, and one thing that did for me, though, was I got the feeling, hey, I can do this. I do have a clue. So, but my first time on stage, I went to that club in San Jose. I think you gave me the name of it.
The Last Laugh.
Last Laugh. I get on stage and I have my routine memorized and I start presenting it and I'm getting some laughs. I'm thinking, this is great. And I almost started to relax, but guess what? All of a sudden, I completely blanked. I had
it's happened to the best of us, Mike.
Totally forgot everything else, and I froze like a deer in the headlights. And I basically just mumbled, "Thank you very much," and I walked off like 3 minutes into my 5 minutes. And but the thing was, I went out in the parking lot, and at first, I was just devastated. I was like, "That's so bad. That is so embarrassing. Maybe I'm an idiot. Why did I ever think I could do this?" But then the thought quickly came in my mind, wait a minute, but you were making people laugh. And I said, I'm like, my brain is like good angel, bad angel on each shoulder, but you made them laugh. you can do that. Just don't blank out next time. And
well, and getting
but
that,
my first experience was humiliating.
getting that initial laugh can be an adrenaline kicking drug that you want to, share and enjoy over and over. And I think it's important that in that parking lot, you realized, I froze and I may have embarrassed myself at the end, but those first 3 minutes, I got a few laughs. I mean, like you said back at the Catch, there's a lot of comics that don't get any laughs for 3 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, the thing is, too, in that parking lot in San Jose, first thing I did was start pounding the hood of the car. And then, to my also utter dismay and embarrassment, I went, oh, shoot, it's not my car.
Well,
things just got worse.
Yeah, right. Well, that's nice you took your anger out on somebody else's vehicle. Well, you mentioned that you kind of crested or experienced stand-up comedy in New York, and you came out to the West Coast. It sounds like your first stage experience was at the Last Laugh in San Jose. But in reality, you were a Bay Area guy, and you were getting on all the different stages like Cobb's and the Holy City Zoo and stuff. That's a great way to learn. At what point did you feel like this could be a career? Because as I alluded to in your intro, you're a very successful corporate guy. You've been doing comedy now for 30 years, made a good living at it. You've been on TV. You've got your own special on Dry Bar Comedy. You've had a CD out. I mean, you've been very successful.
Wow.
At what point?
That's all really cool. I never thought of it that way. Huh.
At what point, though, because when I don't know how old you were when you were doing this. How old when you started?
I didn't start in 84. I was 30 years old.
Wow, that's kind of late.
Let's keep talking so they don't do the math.
Well, that's kind of late for a lot of comics because a lot of the ones that were coming out of San Francisco at that time were starting at 19, 20, 21. And really, and as we've tried to express to the audience, it could take years to develop into a professional comic. And so starting young helps, although Rodney Dangerfield proved us all wrong when he started at age 50 and had a great career after that. But 30 is a little bit more experienced. At what point around that did you decide this was going to be your life?
Well, first of all, that was one example where my clueless immaturity actually paid off. But so there were, I remember one time at the Punchline in San Francisco, and it was open mic night. And I got on and I just blew the roof off the place. And a lot of it was just feeding off the crowd and I did some material, which also worked, but also improvising some stuff, which not everybody could do. I didn't know that then. And just blew the roof off the place. And as I got off to thunderous applause and cheering for the first time ever, I don't know if you remember a guy named Clarence Sterling.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Well, Clarence literally took me by my shoulders and kind of pressed me into the wall and looked in the eyes, very excited, said, see what you can do? Do you see what's possible? You know what you just did? And it hit me like, yeah, okay, I can do this. And this is going to work out. So that was a real turning point because up till then, that kind of thing hadn't happened yet.
Right. So it kind of an aha moment that it's not just a matter of having fun, that you could possibly start getting paid for this and do it over and over and over and maybe make a living. That is a huge awareness to a lot of entertainers, and it takes sometimes years to figure that out. And it sounds like even though you got a little bit of a late start, you figured it out pretty quick.
And also what really helped back then, and that San Francisco comedy scene we were talking about, what really helped me too was getting compliments from someone like Will Durst or John Means, Dr. Gonzo. These guys have been doing it for years, and they would compliment me or say this or say that, and that's what also really helped to know that those kind of people were noticing me a little bit. And even though I still had a long way to go, especially to get to where they were, but they were validating me in a way. It was awesome.
Exactly. Well, it was a community, and it was a close-knit community, and there was a support. I don't think it exists as much today, but back in the 80s, everybody was going through the same experience to try to make the best of this really new entertainment industry that had just taken hold and was growing so fast, not only on stages but on TV. And everybody, wanted to find their place. And San Francisco was certainly one of those locations where everybody was working towards the same kind of existence in stand-up comedy. Now, during the roundtable, you told a great story about you and Robin Williams. Could you share that again?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about that, too, as another experience I had that, talking about validating someone. So this was at Cobb's, on the original Cobb's on Chestnut Street in San Francisco. And again, I had done a set. It went incredibly well. And I did very little, if any, material at all. I just played off the audience, just one of those magical nights. And everything, all the pistons were firing perfectly. And again, left the stage, thunderous applause and cheering. And again, I had done little or no material. So I went outside and I was just sitting on, there's a little wall there you could sit on right in front of the club on Chestnut Street. And I'm thinking about it. And all of a sudden I feel this presence next to me, sit down next to me. And I turn and look, and it's Robin. So Robin was mine and everybody's idol. Okay.
Well, for good
we wanted
reason.
To be Robin. We wanted to do of course, we couldn't do what he did the way he did it, but we all obviously admired him, like unbelievably admired him. So he sits down, I notice it's him, and he goes, "Well, you were really riding the wave tonight." I remember that was her exact words. And I kind of just muttered, "Yeah, guess so." And then he went on to tell me how special that was and how special it is to be able to do that. He goes, "Not everybody can do that, what you just did. And if you keep doing stuff like that, it's really going to help you," and et cetera, et cetera. And he really talked me up. Like, hey, so this was Robin Williams, my comedy idol, telling me, "Hey, I just saw what you did, and I think it's really great." So
yeah, talk about validation,
needless
Mike.
to say,
That's
I was
amazing.
on cloud nine for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean that's an incredible boost to any concerns you had about being in the industry when a hallmark of comedy like that, and you mentioned a few others that gave you similar advice, but to have all these people in the comedy community support you and point out your success on various times on stage, that really, again, can spearhead you or launch you into a career. Now, I know that you got your start out of San Francisco. Where did you end up going around and performing? When did you make the leap to LA or the Midwest? When did you start doing road stuff?
It wasn't too long into it, actually. So first thing I did was I started going. So my sister lived in Boston. We were from New York. She had moved to Boston a bunch of years earlier. So I figured I got a place to stay, and I'd heard, and it was true, Boston also had a really cool, vibrant comedy scene there, and which was true. A lot of great comics also came out of Boston. So I started going to Boston, and I did a little showcase one night at the Comedy Connection, which was probably the main club there, and it went real well. And there was a guy, a comic, who was a pretty big deal in Boston. His name was Tony V.
Oh.
And Tony apparently saw me and put in a word for me with the guys who booked the Comedy Connection, and also this whole slew of one-nighters in the area. And all of a sudden, I stayed an extra 2 weeks because they gave me all this work.
Well, you got to go where the money is, right?
Yeah, and the work, and it was a great experience because there were some comics that if they left San Francisco, it didn't fly so well, So I learned, how to do some good comedy and get good results, out of my so-called home comfort zone, by doing that. And then, my goodness, it just took off from there. And I'd be home for 2 weeks and on the road for 2 weeks and flying here, flying there, doing shows everywhere. And yeah, matter of fact, John Means, Dr. Gonzo, got me my very first headlining gig just on his word alone. He just put in a word for me with these producers out in Kansas and Missouri, and they booked me for like 2 solid weeks doing their 2 major full-time clubs just on his word alone.
Yeah, Dr. Gonzo was a great guy that way. And whenever you have a terrific headliner, like any of the people you've mentioned, go step up and give you a recommendation. I, as a club owner, always appreciated that. And I always book the people that were recommended to me. Now, you've been traveling and doing, you're a professional comic now, you're making money, you're going around the country. Any interesting good or bad experiences on the road?
Nothing really stands out. To be honest with you, so here I was, 30 years old, 31, 32, and I'm traveling the country, and kind of a negative to it all is I just remember thinking, I'm lonely, actually. I see these people every night leave the show. A lot of times they have the comics stand at the door to shake hands as the people left the building. And I remember always seeing these couples hand in hand leaving together. And I'm thinking, that is never going to happen for me because I'm doing this,
Well, you're not the first guy to realize that one of the loneliest jobs is traveling stand-up comic. But I think anybody that travels in entertainment finds it a challenge to get a solid relationship going because you're on the road so much, you're hanging out in nightclubs and bars, and
right.
and it's a tough industry financially. You could be swimming in money one month and dead broke the next. So that's tough for any woman or man to accept. And so I totally get, and I've heard many times, the challenges of being on the road can be hardest on you
Right, because the fun part, obviously, I won't say only, but being on stage, doing your show, and after that, you're going back to some comedy condo or a hotel, and you might be staying in the same condo or apartment as the other comics that they booked who you don't even know because they're from wherever you are. And it was okay. I mean, I wasn't terrible or anything. I met a lot of great people, obviously. But yeah, you're not going to build a relationship with Mrs. Wonderful, in that way.
Well, it's interesting because I've done a lot of interviews, and you're the first to really point out poignantly. I don't know. That makes good verbiage. Point out poignantly that how difficult it is to when it comes to relationships and in being in the industry. And I'm glad you did that because you're even though you're the first to bring it up in an interview, you're not the only one that's experienced that. I know a lot of comics that didn't settle down until late in life. Several others went through divorces. A few here and there have had successful marriages last despite the challenges of the entertainment industry. But it is one of those things that I think that anybody choosing a career early on, I mean, I know that I'm probably being a little vague here, but if you're going to be a firefighter, you're risking your life and you're going to work for 4 days and be off for 7 days. So that's something different. If you're going to be a law enforcement, you're risking your life and you may not come home some night. There's less challenging, you're going to be a CPA. Guess what? You're going to be boring. I mean, there's certain things that when you choose a career that come along with it, right? Kind of like the baggage.
Yeah, you're going to be, for example, you're going to be a gynecologist and enough said.
Exactly. It's never going to be as fun again. But I think that you bring up a good point. Now, all that work over the years, did you get a chance to work with any famous people? You worked with Robin early on. But once you're a road headliner and cruising around, anybody particularly stand out you enjoyed working with?
Well, it was mostly, on the road, I was the headliner. So not so much, but in San Francisco at the time, as you know, I mean, Robin was always coming around, and that would just light up the place. I mean, Paula Poundstone and, my goodness, so many people. And then, we got to open for music acts sometimes. I'm looking at a picture right now of me and the Righteous Brothers.
Awesome. Did you ever do any work for Bill Graham?
Not directly.
Yeah, I mean, he owned the Punchline. Yeah, he owned the Punchline in San Francisco, but he did sometime use his comics for concerts that he was producing around Northern California. I was just curious. Hadn't asked that before, but
one time, I don't know if you remember, there was this punk rock new wave kind of, they were called Erasure.
Okay.
Probably falling on like, who the heck is that ears? But I question, why am I here? I got up there to open the show and I didn't get booed or anything, but they were like silent, like crickets.
Yeah, not the right audience. That's a bad.
And I had to do like 15 minutes and okay, I did it and no one even knows. So.
Well, at least you got out unscathed. Well, now let's move forward. You're on the road for a number of years. You've been a very successful corporate guy. Over the last couple of years has been difficult with COVID and stuff. Have you had to pivot, or what did you do to keep your career and your comedy juices going?
Just been waiting, kind of, I've noticed there's one specific comedian agency that I get booked through. Now a lot more are coming through. For a while there, it just stopped, for a long time. So as far as corporate events, because I kind of really stopped clubs. There's not even that many clubs anymore, because corporate events, let's face it, they pay a lot more, and it's just me. I show up, I do my show, I get paid, I go home. There's not other acts before me. Not, you don't have to deal with a lot of the other things that sometimes can be just fine, sometimes not so fine. I do a pretty clean show, and sometimes I'll get booked, I'll be the headliner, and then in a club, the two acts before me or three are really, really filthy. And so it takes me like 5 minutes when I get on to have the audience readjust, what they're looking for. It's kind of like, well, this guy doesn't even cuss. When do I laugh?
Yeah, that's one of the trademarks of good and bad comedy producing. I always made a point. You never put somebody dirty in front of somebody clean, because it just puts them off in the wrong light to start off. It's not fair to the comic, and it's not fair to the audience. Well, I know that you've got when did your CD, Who Needs Sanity, come out?
Oh, like 6 or 7 years ago.
Is that something people can find online?
I think so.
You're quite the salesman for yourself. Let me just say that, Mike.
I'm a terrible, terrible businessman,
well, let's tell everybody they can find your comedy for just 99 cents. You can hear Mike Guido doing some of his amazing material on Dry Comedy Bar. So if you haven't done so, Dry Bar Comedy. See, I needed you to help me. Dry Bar Comedy, and just Google or search Mike Guido, and for just 99 cents, you can hear some of his material, which is amazing. And I've got some coming up to share with the audience. But before we leave, we have to discuss what I think is not only a huge aspect of your life, but it's something that you've shared and helped the country understand. You've raised money for it. Why don't we tell everybody a little bit about Maria and what you've done for autism?
Okay. Well, thanks, Scott. I appreciate you including this. So for those listening, we have a daughter. Her name is Maria, and she has, a lot of times people say, oh, your daughter has autism. Yeah, my nephew has autism, and he needs someone to go to school with him, or he does this little quirky thing. Well, Maria has what they call low functioning autism, and I always put low functioning in quotation marks. So I don't really like that term so much, because she may be low functioning taking care of herself every day and daily kind of tasks and that sort of thing. But she's very high functioning in being, as we say, freaking amazing. And she's very high functioning in making everyone around her better if they'll let her, So a couple things I've done is I wrote and perform a one-person show. It's a stage show, and it's called The Maria Effect. And it's basically the story of Maria and how she affected my life, and gets really specific. It's a show that really actually makes people laugh and literally makes people cry, because I'm very honest in it. How I had a change and how she changed me through her just innocence and vulnerability. She just changed me for the better. So I do that show. It's called The Maria Effect. I've done it countless times for autism organizations, men's organizations, and that sort of thing. I also do a kind of a keynote speech, if you will. It's even been used as an in-service training at some companies. It's all about perspective. And it talks about how, looking at Maria and her challenges, depending on how we look at our challenges, really helps us to overcome them or to deal with them. If we look at it, like poor me and I'm angry about this or I don't like this, we're not going to get anywhere. But if we look at it like, in my case, how can I help her? I mean, she's my daughter. How can I help her? It just makes me happier and I'm more effective in helping her. And I also speak about Maria in my stand-up. I just talk about, because Maria has done incredibly funny things in public. She just has. And my wife and I learned a long time ago in the beginning, you can either laugh or cry at these things, and we decided to laugh. So I usually preface the whole thing with, listen, I'm going to talk about my daughter Maria now, and you're not laughing at her. Okay? I love her. Okay? Got that? We're just going to laugh at the things she does, and other people's reactions is really the funny part. And it always goes really well, and it's very well received.
Well, I just think it's very honorable what you do in sharing the challenges of parenting a child with autism, and between your comedy and your talks and your fundraising efforts for autism. I just think it's amazing that not only is this been a great addition to you as a person and an entertainer, but you're really making Maria's life even that much more valuable by sharing her experiences.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. After every single performance of the Maria Effect show, literally, and I'm not bragging here, it's just a matter of fact, and I'm always blown away by it. People literally line up to shake my hand. Sometimes people go, "Can I hug you?" Yeah. And I've had grown men with tears in their eyes come up after a show and thank me because maybe they're dealing with something similar. And I help them to just look at it a little differently, And I've always said, because, making people laugh is so awesome. I mean, really awesome. But boy, when I started making people cry on purpose with my presentation, my show or what have you, so powerful. It blows me away every time. Still.
And that's the word. It's powerful because it's the same when an actor can generate different emotions from the audience. For a comic and there's only a few that have been able to do it, but you can take somebody from humor to tragedy and back to humor. You're experiencing something that's so personal and, like the word, there's no better word, powerful than in doing that. And I think that it's, like I said, it's been great for you. I think it represents your daughter well, but also obviously by what you just shared, the audiences really get something out of it too. So congratulations on that, Mike. But let's bring it all back. Mike Guido's had an amazing career. He's a public speaker. If you'd like to hire him, just, Google Mike Guido. I'm sure you'll find somebody that can find him. You can hear his set on Dry Bar Comedy. Did I get that right?
Yes. And you know what? I would tell people, I'll give you my email address. if I could help out in any way, my email address is Mike@Guido, and that's Guido, Mike@GuidoEntertainment.com. Just shoot me an email.
Mike@GuidoEntertainment.com.
Yeah.
Hey, there's no reason not to do that. If there's anybody out there that needs a terrifically professional comedy entertainer and somebody that can also speak to the challenges of a parenting and autism and all the things that so many of us have to deal with, go to mike.guidoentertainment.com. And thank you for listening to this. Mike, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
I'm going to share a little bit of your comedy right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to ask that you come back next week and hear another great show. But right now, sit back and relax and enjoy some stand-up comedy by Mike Guido. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, Scott. Had a ball.
Well, I was in the Four Seasons Hotel in San Diego and I don't know how to act in these situations. So I'm getting ready for bed, and there's a knock at the door. And I open the door, this little crack, and there's a hotel employee standing there, and he goes, "Good evening, sir. Can I turn down your bed?" And I didn't know what he wanted. I guess you guys know now, but I didn't know. I was thinking, he wants to, and he told me he's going to come in my room and pull down my covers for me. Like, I can't handle that. I'm like, dude, I read the manual. I'm in the thing. Slam. Next night, same guy. He knocks at the door, dun, 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 and I open the door. He goes, "Good evening, sir. Can I turn down your bed?" And I was like, "Yeah. Where have you been? I am so tired." I've been waiting for an hour and a half for you to get here. Been sleeping on the floor till you got here. Thank you. Oh man, I love it. I love it so much. This is a really cool job if you can ever do it. So in my travels, one thing is great here because parking is okay here. I mean, I got here early and I just parked right down the street, no problem. Now, I'm sometimes in places like Boston, LA. San Francisco is probably the worst place on the planet to find a legal parking spot, right? Yeah. Are you with me on that? Well, let's not take it anymore! Oh, wait. I'm not an activist. Okay. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I want to see that on film right there. So I'm in San Francisco and I found a legal parking spot. It was like a miracle. There was a shaft of light and angels. So I pulled my car into that spot and I'm sitting behind the wheel reading the newspaper. I'm just waiting for someone. And this lady pulls alongside me, and she is like dressed in a very, well, first of all, she's driving a Lamborghini, Mercedes, BM something, Lexa something that costs more than my house. And she's dressed in this business suit, and she's got her hair all did, her nails, and she's got pearls, and her, wow, okay? So she wants to know, obviously, can she have that spot? Am I leaving? So first, she just taps on the horn, beep, beep, and I ignore her. I'm just reading my newspaper. Then she lays on the horn a little harder, and her horn actually said, "I'm better than you." I'm ignoring her, reading my newspaper. She lays on the horn more. She rolls down the window. "Hey, excuse me, hey, I'm ignoring her, reading my newspaper. And she's not liking this at all. She's like, "Hey, I have a very important meeting. I need to get in that building right there. Can you please move that, whatever you're driving, get out of there." I'm ignoring her, reading my newspaper. And then she snapped. She just snapped. Next thing I know, I hear her screaming, "Hey, idiot! Are you leaving?" So I folded up my paper and I looked over at her. I go, "Hey, lady, chill out." "Yes, I'm leaving. I'm leaving right now." So she backed her car up, and I got out of mine and walked away.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a little comedy by Mike Guido. We hope you enjoyed this interview and set. We'll be back next week with another great show. Thanks for listening. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.